everyone. Welcome to the 𝐬𝐤𝐞𝐿 Digital Learning Series. My name is Misha Rabat. I am the head of the Sustainable Value Chains for 𝐬𝐤𝐞𝐿 and very delighted to be your MC for the day. We have a very exciting agenda ahead with speakers from Temasek, Terrascope, Rabobank, and Amazon Web Services. And the speaker presentations will be directly followed by a panel discussion. So I hope you look forward to that. Before we begin, I just would like to give you a brief overview of 𝐬𝐤𝐞𝐿. I'm sure many of you know 𝐬𝐤𝐞𝐿. We are a multi-stakeholder platform. We were established in 2015 by both the World Economic Forum and ASEAN. And our mission was to cultivate more inclusive, resilient, and sustainable food systems. We do this by brokering commercial as well as nonprofit partnerships between more than 600 partners across different industries that make up their 𝐬𝐤𝐴sia network. So we're creating an ecosystem that supports knowledge sharing, collaboration, innovation, as well as policy change. And this particular digital learning series is one of our ways to provide a regular platform to share our learnings and insights on digital solutions and innovations. This particular event and all digital learning series events is a part of the 𝐬𝐤𝐴sia's regional Grow Ventures Impact Fund, which is supported by IFAD and the Ministry of Agriculture for Food and Rural Affairs of the Republic of Korea. The event is also sponsored by private sector. We have Visa and Cargill as sponsors. Today's event particular, we are talking about big data and AI, and as carbon markets continue to gain momentum among investors, there is that need to validate carbon reductions in our food systems. So we are today talking about big data and AI, and it's recently emerged as an innovative tool to generate robust evidence as well as have a lot of potential to drive more transparency and efficiencies along the value chain. We're very excited that we have an exciting lineup of speakers for you today. We have 𝐻𝐞𝐿. She is the Government Affairs and Carbon Legislation Manager for Rabobank, Acorn. We also have Ryan Rakestraw, Director of Temasek, followed by Jason Gregory, Chief Product Officer from Terrascope. And he will be co-presenting with 𝐬𝐩𝐞𝐿 Tang, the Head of Data Science of Terrascope. Finally, we have Vimal Raj Selvaraj, and he is the Enterprise Account Director for the Amazon Web Services. And following speakers, we will have a panel session, which will be introduced and moderated by Paul Vautier. Happy to say that Paul is our Senior Advisor for Innovations at 𝐬𝐤𝐴sia, and he will be our moderator. And he's in 𝐬𝐤𝐴sia. He brings together business, government, and NGO leaders who share a commitment to using new innovations to make smallholder value chains more productive and sustainable. So Paul is also the founder at Ambit Robotics, and previous to 𝐬𝐤𝐴sia, he's worked in agribusinesses including Mondelez, Olam Syngenta, and Heineken. And with that, I'd like to kick off our presentation section. We will kick it off with an important discussion on insetting. So we are delighted to welcome Ryan Rakestraw, the director at Temasek. Ryan focuses at Temasek. Ryan focuses on making venture capital investments in early stage food and agricultural companies. Given the importance, of course, of innovation that we needed for the growing population that we have, and also to increase sustainability of agricultural production, Ryan in particular seeks to back promising entrepreneurs and teams that can profitably address these needs with new technologies and business models. Previously, Ryan was an early stage investor at Monsanto Growth Ventures, Cultivation Capital, and Yield Lab, which he's helped to found. So with that, let's all welcome Ryan Rakestraw. Ryan, over to you.
All right. Thanks a lot, Misha, and thank you to 𝐬𝐤𝐴sia for hosting this event, and to everyone that kind of took time out of their day to attend this. I'm certain that there's people in the audience that are deeper experts on these topics, but what I wanted to pull together was, from my perspective, a survey of some of the important approaches and themes going on at the farm level with respect to decarbonizing agriculture. Just briefly about myself, I'm with Temasek. I'm a director in the food and agriculture practice. I've been with Temasek about 5.5 years. Temasek as many of you may know, is an investor headquartered in Singapore. Very large investor, about 287 billion assets under management, 900 people, 13 offices. We've got an established food and agriculture practice that we're investing across the food and agriculture value chain, across different investment opportunities. And over the past 10 years, we've deployed about $8 billion in food and agriculture related opportunities. And we have a team of 17 people that are doing and managing these investments. So with respect to decarbonization on the farm globally, just kind of starting off, I think, it's generally accepted that although there's a lot of different places where there's carbon emissions, some of the major sources are the use of fertilizer in cropping systems, the cultivation of rice, which releases methane, and then the production of ruminant livestock, cows, primarily for the production of beef and dairy products through the emission of methane. So those are the sources. And then kind of the hot topics, that people are thinking about within decarbonization is soil carbon, and I'll go into that a little bit. Decarbonizing rice cultivation by reducing methane emissions, and decarbonizing ruminant production by reducing methane emissions. So firstly, just on soil carbon, what's people are really looking at is using soil as a carbon sink. There's accepted methodologies that exist today where you can create carbon credits that can be traded or monetized. Generally, it's accepted that you could do 0.6 tons of carbon equivalent per hectare per year by doing things like cover cropping, no-till, crop rotation, reducing fertilizer. There are some issues, which we can probably go into a little bit more in the panel discussion. But in these methodologies that are process-oriented, one of the things that you have to do is verify the process. And that's something that is really the application of big data and AI today, where we're moving from something that would be very physical or manual, like soil sampling, which is very expensive, and I can share some cost data that we've collected based off of that, to something that's much more scalable and light touch. Using machine learning models to be able to kind of intuit or apply what might be going on in the field or farm, using things like remote sensing, satellite imagery, and using other techniques and technologies. So that's something we're interested in. We've made one investment in a US-based company called Perennial, but there's others out there as well. In rice cultivation, rice is the most carbon-intensive staple crop. This is driven by the anaerobic decomposition of organic matter. There are multiple approaches to addressing this: alternative wetting and drying and direct-seeded rice. Alternative wetting and drying uses intermittent irrigation instead of constant irrigation in a rice field. There is one established protocol under gold standard in which you can use to create carbon credits. And again, it's all about verifying, did this practice occur? And today, under the protocol, you use a farmer notebook. They write it down and then submit it, which has a whole host of inaccuracies associated with it. And again, folks are using, various means, inspection, sending an employee to the field, and just kind of getting the point of understanding, how can we use artificial intelligence to develop models? How can we use imagery? How can we use weather information to be smart about this? Temasek has made one investment in a company called Rise that's largely looking to implement these various rice methane reduction techniques. And finally, which is a little bit more of an opportunity, there's a very heavy amount of carbon emissions associated with ruminants. There again is anaerobic fermentation that occurs in the cow's gut. They then belch this out at a significant level. And what companies and entrepreneurs are really doing is introducing feed additives into the feed to significantly reduce these. As far as I know, there's no, there's no established protocol or methodology today. That's what people are working to develop. And in terms of a business opportunity, as far as I know, nobody's really looking at applying AI and big data as of now. So for you entrepreneurs out there, kind of a white space. And Temasek hasn't invested in this either. And so something that we'd be interested in investing in should there be the right opportunity. So that's it, as quick as I could go from my end.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Very interesting presentation, and looking forward to unpacking that further during the panel session. So to our next speakers who will be co-presenting today. So we have with us Jason Gregory. He is the Chief Product Officer who will be co-presenting with 𝐬𝐩𝐞𝐞. She is the head data scientist of Terrascope. Jason is a seasoned product technology professional with over 20 years of experience creating and leading innovation, commercial and technology solutions across Australia, Southeast Asia, as well as the UK. He has a strong track record of delivering world-class products with a focus on product management, strategy, innovation, and commercial development. Alongside Jason, 𝐬𝐻𝐞𝐿 will be co-presenting. She is an accomplished data science leader who blends technical expertise with strategic vision and product development. At Terrascope, she leverages the power of AI and machine learning to enhance emission measurements, certainty, and repeatability. Her experts enables enterprise decarbonization action through data insights and product delivery. Prior to Terrascope, 𝐬𝐻𝐞𝐿 has worked with MSD, Publicis Media, as well as the Singapore Economic Development Board, taking on many roles in strategy planning as well as business development. I will now hand you over to Jason and 𝐬𝐻𝐞𝐿.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thanks to 𝐸𝐻𝐴sia for hosting us. It's delightful to be here. When we were first posed with this topic about, how does big data and AI, support decarbonization, we had 1,000 things to talk about. We decided to double click on one particular thing. But first of all, what we're seeing is that Scope 3 does account for roughly 85% of our customers' emissions. Many of them are large multinational food and agriculture companies. So for those who aren't measuring Scope 3, they're really not able to understand their full emissions and be able to build a credible pathway to net zero. So that's the first sort of main point. 85% are not measuring. And those that do don't feel that they're measuring it accurately enough. So there's a big journey of data discovery, really understanding where you're at, and then building decarbonization plans. And data is at the absolute crux of all of this. So who are we? We're from Terrascope, a Singapore-based yet global end-to-end decarbonization SaaS platform. We're a part of the Olam family, which is one of the world's largest food and agriculture companies that has built us out through their corporate venture. We're really here to help enterprises keep the planet habitable for all through building their credible pathway to net zero. So we built an end-to-end platform. We're 1 year into our journey and having a tremendous time, learning lots and seeing a tremendous evolution in both the company's attitudes towards carbon emissions, regulatory changes, financial changes, changes in disclosures, change. And really what we're looking at is a multi-decade journey for our customers and companies on building their journey towards net zero. Next slide, please. So if you think about it very simplistically, measuring your emissions, including Scope 1, 2, and 3, is really looking at yesterday. So looking backwards at all of your data, all of your suppliers, all of your activities, and understanding, what is your emissions profile? What is generating the emissions across your organization? Then today, if you understand that, you can build and plan reductions, which is really at the heart of what Terrascope helps customers do. How do you simulate all of those types of things that Ryan just mentioned, which are all tremendous decarbonization opportunities for companies? There's an investment that's to be made. How do you trade off this investment versus another investment? Being able to really understand what's the impact of some of these decarbonization strategies. And to do that, you need ML and AI to be able to process and build those simulations. And then ultimately, you turn those simulations into activities that could be right down to the farm or to a particular factory or supply chain, which really helps you understand where are you going and where do you want to be moving towards tomorrow. So that's sort of the end-to-end. Next slide, please. Interestingly, for food and agriculture companies of the Scope 3, the subset of that, 2/3 of it comes from purchased goods and services, which is really out of their control. So that's a very, very hard thing for companies to understand. If I'm buying cans of tuna or if I'm buying soybeans, or if I'm buying fertilizer, and my provider is not giving me that information on the carbon within there, how can I estimate that to understand where the hotspots are, to then go deeper and engage those suppliers in getting better measurement? You can't go to every single supplier, every single product. You need to focus on what matters and what's material. And we at Terrascope we build models to help you do that. And of course, we know that when you talk about transition risk, customer demand for sustainable goods is certainly rising. And apart from regulatory pressure, financial pressure, investor pressure, consumer pressure is coming. So our customers are really going deep in understanding their Scope 3 emissions, their purchased goods, and then thinking about how they can influence the decarbonization of those things as well. Next slide, please. So traditionally, you've got sort of two ways. One is, if all suppliers and all companies did a full life cycle assessment, a detailed assessment on their products, then they would provide it to companies that are buying it, and you can account for it. The reality is that's not happening, certainly not at scale. So that's one way. The other way is like asking for input, filling out forms. We're taking a hybrid approach, and this is where data science comes in. I'll throw to 𝐬𝐸 to talk about how we can use data science and ML to start estimating the carbon emissions within purchased goods. 𝐬𝐸?
Yep, thank you, Jason. Next slide, please. So the data science and ML methodology that we have developed enables us to estimate the carbon footprint of each unit of product at scale. And this is in the absence of any primary supplier data that's being provided. And based on some tests that we have run, we can go up to like 90% accuracy with our methodology that then enables us to confidently say how much of the emissions from each unit of product that's being made is coming from which ingredients, and how much is actually from packaging, which then I think provides very actionable insight to our clients in terms of how they should effectively decarbonize their entire supply chain. Next slide, please. So our approach, as Jason mentioned, is data science based, and it leverages the emission factor and LCA databases that are available out there. And the whole idea is to use ML to create proxies and to impute the data, which we are not able to collect from all suppliers, maybe consistently or at scale. And we see it as like a nice balance between speed and accuracy, which is good enough for our customers to then confidently or credibly take action in order to decarbonize their production and various processes that go into that. So next slide, please. So what exactly is this methodology? At a very high level, we take a can of tuna as an example. We'll break it down into all of its constituent parts. So the individual ingredients as well as the packaging that went into making 1 unit of it. We approximate the proportions of these different ingredients, and then we match each ingredient to the most relevant emission factor in our database, and we add all of the emissions across these ingredients to give us then the footprint of that 1 unit of product. Next slide, please. And this methodology enables us to then really build a view of what are driving the emissions of the products which our clients make at an ingredient level. So that is the sort of granularity which then enables our clients to know the suppliers that they need to engage with the most, which will then make the most material impact on the decarbonization plans that they have, and enable them to really reach their net zero targets. Next slide, please. Yeah. We're happy to share more during the panel discussion to go into more details.
Great. Thank you so much for your presentation. That was very interesting, and looking forward to, there are a number of questions coming up already on the chat, and you can have a look as well, and we will bring that up in the panel session. I now have our next speaker. We have 𝐻𝐸𝐞𝐿. Hannah is the Government Affairs and Carbon Legislation Manager for Rabobank Acorn, which is an agroforestry program that connects smallholder farmers to the voluntary carbon market. Currently, she manages governmental relations for the team to promote transparency in the carbon space. Prior to this role, she spent over a decade in the United Nations space as a diplomatic advisor, a consultant, as well as a researcher. So please join me in welcoming 𝐬𝐤𝐞𝐿.
Thank you, Misha, and lovely to meet everyone today virtually. I'm here to present on behalf of Rabobank, which is one of the largest food and agri banks in the world. We are still a Dutch cooperative bank, so our feet is firmly planted on the ground when it comes to smallholder farmers. 𝐸𝐸𝐞𝐿 is actually an acronym for agroforestry carbon removal units for the organic restoration of nature. So that's quite a mouthful, but hopefully I'll be able to unpack that during the presentation. Next slide. Yes, so as Misha mentioned, we are an agroforestry project or program. And basically what we've seen is monoculture is not doing anyone a favor. It's not doing the farmer any favor. It's not doing the environment any favor. And it's also not doing the produce itself any favor. And by switching to agroforestry, which is planting trees either at the perimeter or on an island or sparsely across the crops, if it's a shade-loving crop, we're able to improve soil health, make the farmer more climate and weather resilient, and improve yield, as well as sequester carbon through those trees within the farmer's plot. Next slide. So this is quite an overwhelming schema of how we work, but basically the most important part of this whole process is really the farmer who plants the trees and our local partner, which is the local organizations in the face of an NGO or a farmer cooperative that has these farmer relationships. So once the farmers have planted trees, which is number one, our local partner collects their data, and then that's inputted into our 𝐸𝐸𝐞𝐿 platform, where we use satellite-based remote sensing technology in order to measure the growth of biomass between year 1 and year 2. We generate what is called a carbon removal unit, which is 1 ton of CO2 removed from the atmosphere, and we are certified by Plan Vivo. After we've generated the crew, we go on to number 5, which is that we sell those carbon removal units to companies to offset their unavoidable emissions. Good to note that we only sell to companies that have already decarbonized within their processes, and we sell at one of the highest prices in the market. So in our last auction, it was at 31 euros. We then deregister or retire those credits within our registry, and then we pay the farmer 80% of that of the sale price of that 31 euros. And so it's a really incentive for them to switch to agroforestry and maintain those trees. Next slide. What we saw at the beginning of our journey was really 3 barriers for a smallholder farmer to access the voluntary carbon market. The first is high certification costs. So typically it could cost up to 50,000 euros upfront to be certified so that you can sell those carbon credits. And that's just a cost that's untenable for most farmers. And so what we do is we cover those costs. The second is monitoring. How do you actually determine how many tons of CO2 has been sequestered by a certain farmer? And what we do is we use traceable satellite-based remote sensing technology and LiDAR in order to verify those numbers at scale remotely. And third is fair payments. As I said earlier, that's really what drives us. We saw that there's a lot of carbon colonialism within the market, and we wanted to make sure that we push the ceiling percentage of 80% going back to the smallholder farmers, with 10% going to our local partner to cover their costs and 10% to cover our costs. Next slide. So how does our measurements work? First is we do sample-based collection of ground truth data. So you see an enumerator at the left side doing a survey of the land. And then the second is we use LiDAR technology, which you can imagine a plane flying across a certain eco-region and shooting down laser to give us a 3D schema or a picture of what the trees look like within that area. And then together with satellite images, we're able to verify the number, the biomass growth. Next slide. Basically, there's not that much law regarding remote sensing. There's some guidance for governments when it comes to the Outer Space Treaty or principles on remote sensing, but this isn't enforceable. That's why there are a lot of issues that governments face when it comes to these new technology for gathering big data. Next slide. Some of these concerns include privacy and data protection. Second is environmental impact. If it's a drone, you don't want it to be going across certain birds or sensitive areas, and of course, national security. So you don't want to be taking pictures of military or state assets. I'm happy to dive into this a little bit further, but that's the end of my presentation, and I look forward to engaging with Paul in the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. I think very inspiring work that you're doing. It's great to know that the farmer gets 80%. That's excellent. Last but not least, we have Vimal Sevalraj. He is the Enterprise Account Director for Amazon Web Services. So Vimal, he manages the manufacturing and agri customers for Singapore market, and he also engages with customers in the industry to propose new business models and drive innovation by leveraging cloud. So as part of his customer engagements, Vimal also advises on how cloud can be leveraged to drive an organizational sustainability plans and goals. So prior to Amazon Web Services, Vimal spent more than a decade in IT companies such as Microsoft, Oracle, and IBM. And we're very happy to have him today. So please welcome Vimal.
Hey, thanks a lot, Misha. Hello, everyone. As Misha just introduced, my name is Vimal, and I work for Amazon Web Services. I manage a set of manufacturing and agri customers from a regional perspective, and I've been with AWS for about 4 years now. Very happy to talk with everyone. So today, I will be covering on Amazon's view towards sustainability. The way I structured my presentation is that I will start with an introduction to how Amazon views sustainability, and then what tools and softwares we have that helps customers to develop sustainability related solutions, one of which could be carbon reduction solution, carbon emission reduction solution. And then finally, I'll wrap it up with how one of our customer has leveraged these solutions and services to build a product that drives sustainability in the agri sector. So what you see on screen is our newest leadership principles. So in Amazon, all our operations is driven by what we call leadership principles. There were 14 leadership principles about a couple of years back, and then we added 2 leadership principles recently. These leadership principles govern how we drive our business. The newest addition is related to sustainability. So it reads like, success and scale brings broad responsibility. So the inner meaning here is that we are very conscious of our operations, and we want to make sure that our operations are sustainable in nature. So in line with that, next slide. In line with that, Amazon has been driving a set of initiatives to support the sustainability angle. We aim to be net zero carbon by 2040. And this is part of what we created, the Climate Pledge. We created Climate Pledge working with a group called Global Optimism. It was founded in 2019. And with us, there are about 400 plus signatories, customers who have signed the pledge stating that they'll be net zero carbon by 2040. And one of our customers who signed the Climate Pledge recently, based out of Singapore, is Terrascope. In addition to that, we've also made a commitment to run our operations 100% by renewable energy. So the initial commitment was to run our operations by renewable energy by 2030. We're on track to achieve that by 2025. So these are Amazon's initiatives towards sustainability. And if you can move to the next slide. So what solutions and services does Amazon Web Services have to drive sustainability solutions to help customers build sustainability solutions using AI/ML? You see a huge list of services in the screen. So for those who don't know, Amazon Web Services is like a Lego, for the lack of better word. We offer the building blocks using which customers build solutions. And these are the Legos or the building blocks related to AI/ML. And Terrascope, for example, Jason presented about Terrascope. Terrascope has used many of these services to build their solution that runs on Amazon Web Services. If you can move to the next slide. In addition to these building blocks for AI/ML that drive sustainability, we also have a huge data set. It's called Amazon Sustainability Data Initiative, which gives our customers access to large data sets that's related to geospatial information, such as weather, satellite information, imagery that can be accessed and leveraged in building sustainability solutions. One example of such a use case could be how can you reduce carbon emissions by leveraging geospatial satellite data. Okay, so that brings me to the use case that I wanted to share. CropX is one of our customer, and this customer used these geospatial data as part of our sustainability data initiative, and also the building blocks that I shared in one of the previous slides to build a solution. So basically what the solution does is that it collects data from thousands of sensors that are installed under the soil. It collects those data, and it also collects data from the geospatial area, like satellite imagery, weather information, etc. And then we've helped the customer to develop patented models that help the farmers to reduce the water requirement for irrigation, and at the same time increase the yields. So this solution has been in the market for more than 3 to 4 years. And then we have more than 1,200 customers using this solution, and they've been able to achieve 40% reduction in water used for irrigation, at the same time increase the yield by 10%. And this is possible because they've been able to leverage the AIML solutions that's available in AWS to build their patented models. Yeah, so that's the use case that I wanted to share, and happy to take any questions on the slides that I presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Vimal. Thank you very much for your presentation. It's very interesting, and now we've come to the a great part of the forum today and the webinar today, and we will be doing a panel discussion with our panelists, and Paul will be coming in to moderate this session. So we will slowly put the speakers up on the screen one by one. We will be pinning all the speakers, and we will be beginning the panel session soon. The chat box has been blowing up with questions, and we're happy to see all your questions. And I believe some of the speakers have already answered your questions, but we will be deep diving into most of these questions in the panel discussion. So I believe we are just waiting for Jason. Jason, if you could turn on your video so that we can tag you in the presentation.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Misha. I want to start off with a couple of questions for Ryan that have come through from the audience. The first is we're looking for a bit more detail on the investment that you made into soil carbon capture and how that works, and the potential that you see for soil carbon capture. And a second question around incentives. I mean, if there's these behaviors that we want smallholders to adopt that sequester carbon, where's the incentive, and how do we incentivize smallholders? Thanks, Ryan.
Yep, thanks, Paul. I mean, while we're kind of tremendously excited about this area, and there's a lot of activity, I think it is in the early days. I mean, I think it's still the case that roughly 1% of all carbon credits transacted are soil carbon related. So that presents just the scale, but also the opportunity. And we do believe and support some of the published standards. The leading standards come from the Clean Energy Regulator in Australia, in this part of the world, and then also the verified carbon standard from Verra, the VM 42 standard, I think is well regarded at this point in time. And from a Temasek perspective, where we're investing in today is, as I discussed, really the enabling technologies associated with creation, measurement, and verification of these carbon reduction efforts. Firstly, we think that it's a little bit where the value is right now, as we're establishing the framework and systems, and it's also what kind of the ecosystem we think needs at present. Nonetheless, I mean, I think that there is significant activity that's going on in the U.S., in Asia. Organizations like Indigo, which is operating in the U.S. and India, announced their second round of carbon farming. Over 100,000 credits transacted. Nurtured Our Farm, UPL initiative in India, has announced a similar initiative, roughly 100,000 credits. They've got a mandate, this year to increase that to something like 1 million credits as well. So these efforts are significantly increasing, but we see our role as kind of getting involved in either kind of the direct components of what's going to reduce carbon, or in kind of the enabling infrastructure and technology, and not investing in the carbon projects themselves. Our investment to date, and the company that I mentioned, Perennial, is using some of these, what we'll call remote sensing combined with artificial intelligence approaches to measure and then kind of verify these different practices, like cover cropping, crop rotation, etc. With respect to incentivizing smallholder farmers, firstly, there's kind of the value pool that's being created. I mean, I think a number of these agriculture carbon credits are being transacted. Rabobank would probably have the best view of this than me, but between $20 and $40, I think is kind of where things are at. And then the view is that that's going to increase over time. Optimistically, maybe that goes to kind of $70 per credit, which is the the value pool. And if roughly people were talking about 0.6 credits per hectare per year, over a 20-25 year time frame, that kind of gives you a sense of the value creation that can be shared. Now that needs to go part to farmer, part to project developer, part to technology provider, those types of things. But that those types of structures are a little bit being worked out and figured out. As another model specific to smallholder farmers, people are looking at doing things like combining carbon credits with providing inputs. So you get your inputs for free. I get your carbon credits, or I give you working capital or financing for free, and I get your carbon credits. Just as a way to kind of work with growers that don't necessarily have the balance sheet or the ability to invest, or the ability to kind of really take a loss in 1 or 2 seasons that might be needed in order to implement some of these practices.
Thanks, Rainer. I think it's an interesting picture that you paint there of the value pool that's available, and then building that bridge to the smallholder growers and bringing that incentive to bear on the behaviours. And I think the Rabobank's a really interesting example of how that can be done. So Hannah, I wanted to jump over to you next. I think the audience was looking to understand a little bit more about how you measure biomass, and particularly where there is a variation between the trees or the species or types of trees that you are observing. And then I think there was also some interest in where you work, in which countries you're operating.
So yeah, I tried to answer most of the questions, but I feel like my fingers aren't fast enough. But yeah, happy to address it here now. Basically, we have generated carbon removal units in LATAM and also in Africa. And currently we're onboarding farmers in Cambodia, in Vietnam, and we're also talking to potential local partners in the Philippines as well as in Indonesia. So Indonesia is a little bit trickier because of their carbon legislation and the moratorium they had, which has currently been lifted. So we're working around what the new system is when it comes to the government. But basically, yes, to answer your first question, there are different trees or different agroforestry designs. We have an entire team of data scientists, and together with our agroforestry experts, we try to talk to our local partners to see what works best for the farmers. So that will, again, like lots of people like to ask me, how much carbon removal units could a farmer generate? And for us, the answer is it really depends on the agroforestry design. What are they planting? Is it something that needs to be coppiced, which is to chop down parts of the trees? And which part of the life cycle of the tree are we measuring at? So that's kind of, yeah, we get different yields for different countries, different eco-regions. It is nature after all, so there's no one size fits all. But we all take that into account when we do our scoping. So initially we look at the area, we do a mapping, we take a sample size, and then we feed it into our models and determine what's the CRU potential, which is the carbon removal potential. And again, I think Ryan already answered it, but for us, the biggest incentive, and I've been also in the field, the farmers really want money, extra money for it, because they're sacrificing a portion of their land in order to plant the trees. So you have to compensate them with an amount that actually makes sense for them.
Thanks very much, Ada. That's really appreciated. A question for the Terrascopes team. I think your presentation articulated the measurement side of the equation very well, and how you look at the emissions that it can be attributed to a particular product. And I thought it was interesting that you combine data sources. And I think that's actually been a theme from all of our speakers, is the reality that in order to account for carbon emissions, it's not just a case of sending up a satellite and taking satellite data, or going out and interviewing farmers. Sometimes it's a mix of those two things, and sometimes bringing in data sources from other areas as well. And I think that's an interesting learning for our audience. This could be quite a complicated problem to solve and require multiple sources of data. For the Terrascope team, I wanted to ask the what's next question. So you articulated how you might work with a drink company or a tuna company to work out what their emissions are. What actions have you seen your clients take once they have this data, and where's the low-hanging fruit? Where's the wins here for many of your customers in terms of reducing emissions?
Yeah, great question. Thanks for that, Paul. And it's so true. I mean, every one of our customers has a very different, I guess, maturity and data profile. So fundamentally, to measure your greenhouse gas emissions across your entire supply chain, if you don't have primary data for everything, how do you know where to look to decarbonize? So one of the questions in the chat was, what are we building towards? So GHG protocol, ISO 14064 are the two things that we work towards, to make sure that we're doing it in a structured, appropriate way that can then get external assurance. There was another question around, if you do a tuna can product carbon footprint, how do you validate? There's third-party bodies, the Ernst & Youngs of the world, 𝐬𝐩𝐞𝐿, all of these guys that go and do assurance on the products to make sure that you're adhering to the right principles. For something like a tuna can, the actual answer is it varies depending on what you want to do with that product carbon footprint. Is it for legislative purposes? Is it for product carbon labeling in particular countries? There's different standards that you would need to adhere to. So you would go through a third-party assurance. Now, we can't do that because we're the platform, but our platform itself is being assured. So short, to answer the actual question about what sort of behaviors are we seeing? First of all, a lot of surprise at where the emissions are coming from. So much from Scope 3, so much from particular parts of the supply chain that they feel quite removed from. So typically it's, oh my goodness, there's a big opportunity there. Either two things. One, can I do anything to decarbonize? So what simulations can I build? What are the opportunities or levers I could pull to start reducing my carbon footprint? But really what we're seeing a lot of is where do I need more data, which is where a lot of the solutions and the Rabobank things come in. Estimates is fine to, it's fine for GHG reporting, but it's really not specific enough to action. So how can I go and get more data? Is it collecting more data from the farmers? Is it using satellite technology? Is it all of that type of thing? So for us, it really is a multi-year data improvement journey for customers. And what we help them identify is, where is it material? Where are the apparent big hotspots to go deep to then decarbonize? So it's very much an iterative journey as they progress. And we're seeing companies put in different programs to collect more data, partnering with the Rabobanks of the world to do better monitoring, and working with their financial teams, which is where we're really seeing a lot more. It's not just ESG professionals now, it's the CFO office. How do they quantify the value of these investments in decarbonizing, across all of the different risks? So we're seeing a lot of behavioral changes as a result of just measurements.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add one point that we're trying to also go beyond just the ingredients that are going into the products, and really digging into what is driving the emissions of those ingredients, right? Is it because of deforestation? Is it because of over fertilization? Is it because of some other farming practices? And so what we are really trying to do there, and we have seen this resonating with our customers as well, is to come up with a set of actions more related, I think, to the farming practices, for example, right? Or some of the production processes that their suppliers would undertake, and then to support the customers in engaging with those targeted suppliers, who would then help them to decarbonize a very large portion of their emissions across many products. So I would say, yes, it's really going beyond just knowing what products to at least knowing what drivers, and then or at least knowing what ingredients are common, and then the drivers across these ingredients.
Wonderful, thanks. And it's and I think Ryan did a really good job of this at the start of the event and highlighting where the main emissions are coming from. And I guess that's the really important part of any of these journeys in terms of carbon reduction, is getting a really good handle on sources and what's driving those emissions, whether it's a tin of tuna or rice production in Southeast Asia. And I think as you drill further and further and break that down and understand the sources, then it's very useful going forward.
Yeah, actually, one other point, Ryan, just one other point. It's interesting because there was a question around scope 4. What is the scope 4 emissions? A sort of a more recent term, which I've typed into the thing, a definition, but it's kind of avoided emissions, really about use of product. Interestingly, whilst you can't necessarily report against it and claim it as a reduction, some of our customers are finding use of product is actually a significant source of their GHG. So if you're a technology company, the use of an app, or it actually needs to be accounted for in a product carbon footprint, not necessarily in a corporate carbon. So there's ways, and we're seeing companies do initiatives to reduce the impact of the use of product. So if you're thinking of cradle to cradle or cradle to grave, what type of materials are you using? Is it going to be composted? Is it going to be recycled? What's the weight? How's it going to be transported? So there's a lot of stuff on use of product that is actually quite significant in emissions for some of our customers. So that's another sort of insight that people get. How can I think about how the product's going to be used in the countries where it's going to be used? Because it can be very different. And how can I think about that for decarbonisation?
Thank you for Jason. Vimal, we mentioned a moment ago, or in fact, all the speakers mentioned the concept of combining data sources, whether it's on the ground interviews with farmers or farmer diaries mixed with satellite data. Can you give us, given your sort of technical background and the expertise of AWS, for our audience, if they do have access to multiple different sets of data about their farmer suppliers or their suppliers of raw materials, are there any sort of guidelines or suggestions about how to bring various sorts of data together and use it well?
Yeah, great question, and I think very relevant to Terrascope, right? Terrascope runs on AWS, and so if you consider the steps that's involved in driving any AI/ML based insights out of the multiple sources, the first step is, of course, finding out the sources, and I think in the sustainability space and carbon reduction space, the finding the right sources is probably the biggest challenge, and then comes the type of data that's available in these sources. There are different formats of data. For example, the geospatial data is various formats in comparison to simple IoT data that can be collected from soil, for example. So there needs to be a lot of in IT world what we call a ETL process that combines these data sources into understandable formats that can be fed into the AI models. There are a lot of tools and softwares available out there in the market. For example, AWS has our own what we call native services that helps with these collections of data from the various sources, and then transforming it into a format that can be fed into AI/ML models and there are also our partner solution that does this. But still, like, based on our experience in working with customers in sustainability industry, we do see that still that there is a journey involved here, and we see customers still reverting to manual models in terms of how they extract the data and then integrate it.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks, Vimal. And I think for many of us in the agricultural industry across Southeast Asia, it's helpful to have that technical perspective in terms of designing our projects. Ryan, at the start of the session, you spoke about soil and you spoke about rice. And I think on one hand, there's an opportunity to sequester carbon into soils. At the other end of the spectrum, we have an opportunity to reduce emissions from rice. If you were a betting man, where do you see the more immediate opportunity for smallholders in Southeast Asia? Do you think you would be putting your money on soil at the moment or on reductions from rice? And where do you see the movement or changes needed to unlock either one or the other?
We've bet on both, and I think we need both. I mean, the opportunity to sequester carbon in the agricultural soils is massive, right? I mean, today there's kind of 680 gigatons of soil organic carbon that exists in the top 30 centimeters of soil in agricultural fields, and that's got the holding capacity to put significantly more. So, if we're just talking about a 2-degree world, I mean, I think that this is something that we've got to do. With respect to smallholders in Southeast Asia, this is where the majority of, this is the staple crop. Significant portion of the foodstuff, the calories consumed, is rice. It's what many of the growers in the region do farm. So if we're looking at the footprint in Thailand and Vietnam and Indonesia, China, these types of places, it's a significant impact. And there, I think that the types of things that are, there's relatively what we would consider, I mean, simple things, but applying them in practice it isn't so simple. But I think that there's a strong understanding of things that can be done to dramatically reduce the carbon footprint. Things like this alternative wetting and drying that I discussed, things like direct seeded rice, a little bit more optimal use of fertilizer, and then kind of better crop genetics, biologicals for reducing methane. So, it's a bit of a cop-out, but for globally, I think it's soil carbon for this region. It's rice cultivation.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks, Ryan. It's good to have a perspective on both of those big opportunities. As we draw to a close, I want to say how encouraged I am by the stories. For the story about how we can understand the carbon emissions from our products and map those and really understand them, so we can take action, and understanding where those big wins are. For the opportunity for smallholders to capture carbon credits when they're participating in agroforestry, the opportunity that you've articulated, Ryan, around rice and around soils. It's encouraging in the face of a seemingly intractable and complex problem like carbon emissions from the sector, to see that so many companies are chipping away at small parts of what is a very complicated picture. And each of you have had a really interesting story to share, and I'm sure the audience have been encouraged and learnt a lot from it. So I'll pass back to you, Misha.
Thank you very much for your time today. Feel free to follow us on 𝐬𝐤𝐞𝐿 on LinkedIn. You will find the QR codes on your screen. And as I mentioned, the future events will be posted here. And if you do decide to post your thoughts of the day, and I encourage you to do so, please do tag us at 𝐬𝐤𝐴sia on LinkedIn and also at 𝐬𝐤𝐴sia on Twitter. thank you again for
It's called
attending.
X now, Misha. It's not Twitter anymore.
Oh, sorry. My bad. You're right. So thank you very much again for your participation today, and I wish you all an inspired day. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Good to
Thanks
see you.
all. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.